Our girl is destitute.
What conspiracy theory do you have?
You're the Feyre.
I'm Feyre. He hates Tamlin. He's also a bit of a petty bitch.
And yet, she decides, let me just shoot my shot and see it. I'm like, girl. Hey, sexy people.
Hey, pretty people, pretty friends. Hello. Welcome back.
I think every episode I just say hello, so I'm like, I'm going to try something new. That was the first thing that came out of my mouth for some reason.
It was organic. You were feeling
Yeah.
it. You were feeling
Yeah.
it.
But I feel, we don't know a ton of our listeners yet. I guess we kind of do, but I do feel in my heart y'all are sexy people.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. There's a particular type of person who's going to keep coming back to these to these episodes, and I think they're very sexy humans.
Hell yeah.
Whoever they are.
Well, hi.
Hi. How are you?
It's Monday. We last recorded on Saturday, okay? So I'm like, what in the world could possibly happen between now and then? I'm going to have such a boring Cauldron save me, I'm sure. Until go on my phone and I'm like, oh, cool. We just bombed Iran. Great. So that's my Cauldron save me of this week. Hopefully every one of mine won't be super depressing from here on out. But the reason I wanted this one to be in particular is, it is scary right now. I think hopefully things will be okay. Corryn and I, we grew up, remembering what happened post 9/11, grew up throughout the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Like, we very well remember the rampant Islamophobia that occurred. And that's why I wanted to bring this up is already we're hearing a lot of buzzwords from one particular side of the aisle. I know it's a scary time. We have to do what we can to remain as calm as possible and also stay as informed as possible because, Trump and the right are using the same playbook as they did during 9/11 and all of that. So, look out for your neighbors, look out for yourselves, don't fall for the racism.
Yep.
And, my heart really goes out to Iranians and people of Iranian descent and anyone who is being, directly affected, especially by this. Yeah. This is a war no one wants. So, yeah, I know it's a heavy one, but I would feel weird not talking about it.
Absolutely. No, I'm really thankful that you talked about it because it's important. It's things that are going on, and you kind of mentioned you're worried about your Cauldron save me's being these like kind of depressing things, but I think what Ariel and I had discussed before was just it is authentically what is going on. And while we are two girlies who do really like to escape into art and things, it's a really important part for like our mental health. We are still people who we can't fully separate. And so, it's an important thing to talk about. It's an important thing to bring up. And, this is the authentic American experience right now. And so yeah. It's important to bring it up. Thank you for saying all the things that you did.
Thank you for letting me and listening. One last thing I wanted to mention is, I know right now everyone's kind of going through, I feel this collective, like, what news sources do we go to, in terms of both who's telling the actual facts, right? And who is just making entertainment or not getting everything correct or has an agenda, as well as like who is telling it in a way that is calm and not inflammatory. One news source I personally love and is really accessible is Under the Desk News. They're on both TikTok and Instagram. V from Under the Desk News is a really stellar journalist. They've actually worked with the New York Times before. So they're a legitimate journalist and they've really been just giving the facts and like doing it in a calm way while also acknowledging like what's going on is really fucked up. So I highly encourage people, if you're trying to find a good news source that isn't like super scary and is giving the facts, under the desk news is really, really great. I'll link them in the show notes. So yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, thank you for that. It feels very silly and to do my cauldron save me. But
We need something light.
Ariel told me I should still do it. So to do the hilarious balance that is what our lives are right now, right? Which is like these heavy things that are occurring, but then this still sort of day-to-day ridiculousness. And this is a hardcore first world problem, which I guess it's like my second first world problem now. Okay, so I have a robot vacuum. Yeah, all my robot vacuum homies out there. Mine, my partner and I have lovingly named him Eugene. I can't explain where the name came from. It just kind of happened, but it's really fun when you hear Eugene freaking out in a room and one of us can just be like, "Ugh, Eugene," it's just very satisfying. Well, Eugene went a little buck wild in my
Oh
office
no.
today before the recording. And I'm in the kitchen, like getting myself ready. And all of a sudden I hear this crazy crash and then just like, "Rrr, rrr, rrr, rrr." And I come into this room. Eugene had gotten caught up on the computer cable and had gotten
Classic.
so caught up that had literally pulled the computer and my Focusrite completely off the desks and everything was
No.
on the ground. And my mic stand had completely toppled over and everything's just like sitting on top of Eugene and Eugene's just like trying to like move about the cabin. And I was just like, what the fuck, bro? And I literally had this moment where I was just like, feels so ridiculous to be talking about this after what you just said. But
No.
I literally was just like, just imagine this. I'm in my office screaming at this robot, just being like, Eugene, what the fuck? If you broke my computer, I'm pulling you apart.
Anyone who has one of these like robotic vacuum machines, like this is par for the course and super like I was so mean to a Roomba for like the first few years of having it. And then I was like, both jokingly, half joking, half not joking. I'm like, I really should be nice to it in case the uprising does happen because that bitch is going to be the first one to do something to us. So maybe I should be nicer to it.
Well, see, it's so funny because like the Uffy is like kind of like the off-brand Roomba because like it
Right.
doesn't like map your house or like anything like that. So
Oh, no.
this sweet fucker every time is like discovering things for the first time and it's just like every single time. And also if there's a really big shaft of light like on the ground like from the sun,
Oh,
he will
no.
get caught in it and just kind of go around in a circle and just start beeping. And we're just like, Eugene, like, bro, get it
Oh,
together, man.
when they get
So yeah.
caught, it's so fun. Like ours gets caught constantly under our table because like our chairs are
Yeah.
like so close together.
Right,
So it
right.
like creates its own little prison
Yeah.
basically for itself. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like
I've literally walked into a room that he, like, got himself caught into, and I find myself being like, "You did this to yourself, homie, like, I don't know
right?
what you want." And then, like, Jeff will just be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you talking to this robot? Like, he's gonna learn. Like, he's gonna
Right?
learn from what, you know?" But so yeah, that's my cauldron save me from today. Obviously,
I
my
love it.
computer is still working. Everything's still working, but it was
Yeah.
just like the crash and then to just see this little like white circular robot just like it's like, all right, homie, get it together. Go home. You're drunk.
They're like kind of adorable in like a helpless way. It's like when you
Absolutely.
see like a little baby animal not know what to
Yes.
do. Like that's what
Precisely.
these little Roomba things are like.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it feels like. But yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, I
Oy.
don't know what kind of a segue we can do from
Yeah,
that
I
into
don't
this
either.
chapter. I was like trying to think, but there really isn't any because they
Yeah.
didn't have Roombas in Prithian times.
Wow. Yeah. So chapter 26. Ooh, the lolly. It's just a lot of information again without getting a lot of information. It's a really big practice and Ariel and I like putting on our like first time reader caps and then putting on our like we know the whole story caps.
Yeah.
But before we really like dive right into that pool,
Yeah.
I really want to start with just how the chapter starts.
How fucking horny they are for
Oh
each
my
other.
god. This next morning. This
Oh
like
my
the day
god.
after, which I definitely tell me if I was the only one who did this, but I got pulled back into the kind of situation where you have that like cute night with that person
Yes.
that you like really like. You know, you
Yeah.
have that cute experience with them that maybe, yeah, it's like till dawn and it's just this magical whatever. And then it's the first time you're seeing each other afterwards. And it's the first time,
Totally.
right? It's the first time you're seeing each other with other people around too. And
Yes.
it's like that slight panic of like,
Yeah.
what are we going to be like now?
Right. Well, it's like because this is like not even like this is only a few hours
Yeah,
since because
actually.
like
Yeah.
they stayed up till dawn, watch the sunrise. So this like it totally reminds me of like I'm thinking back to like college in particular,
Yeah.
where it's like you slept over that your person's house,
Yeah.
and then like you maybe go back to your place to shower or something, and then you have to like be out in a group with them, and it's like yeah, totally
Yeah,
that
you're
thing.
like at the dining commons together like the next
Yes,
day and you're
and
just like
everyone
and
knows
everyone knows
because the
exactly.
vibe is different.
The vibe is different,
Yeah,
everyone, and you're just like, "Are you gonna acknowledge it first? Am I gonna acknowledge it? Are we gonna acknowledge it at all?" Are and like and it's that slight fear you have of like, is the other person we've popped the bubble of like the magic moment that we had. Like we went our separate ways for a little bit and now we've come back. Like, how is that other person feeling now?
yeah.
And what's funny is it's like I mean, I think the moment that we get is like pretty validating because it's just they are hot to go. Like they are
Oh,
just wowie.
she literally says on page 232, "He could have had me right there on top of that table." Like, "Oh my god, girl." Like, this is breakfast for you.
Yeah, I know. Well, and like the thing that I love too is well, also I love that the table has stayed shorter now.
I know,
Right?
it's
That
so
like and
cute.
so it's just this really fun, like it's just good imagery of, Tam and Lucien and Feyre like all sitting at this like cute little table. And how like basically it all kind of starts with just like Feyre like trying to have the conversation start with someone else, right? Like she like asks
Right.
where Lucien is. We learn that poor Lucien was on border patrol all last night, but I love how it's like Tamlin gives him a little look and he's like, okay, well, I wasn't alone. And you're like,
Right.
okay, so you
He
were
got some.
really patrolling, weren't you, Lucien?
So on duty.
So on duty. And then he kind of hits him back with like, rumor has it, you two didn't come back till dawn, whatever. And I love that like they're in this moment of Feyre's just kind of like, what are we gonna do? And then it says, but Tamlin's gaze now roved my face as if searching for any tinge of regret, of fear. Ridiculous. And I love it because we're like, okay, we know Feyre's fully in. Like
Yep.
she's good. And then they have this like really hilarious like little teasy back and forth, where she's like, you bit
Yeah.
my neck. Like a few kisses like are nothing. And then, he's like, nothing. His eyes flicked to my lips. Lucien shifted in his seat, muttering to the cauldron to spare him, but I ignored him. And then yeah, they start this like back and forth that's just it's very cute and yeah, I find it very validating because you're like, okay, they're kind of doing like the in between of
Yeah.
like we're not fully saying that we're done, like
Exclusive.
we're in it,
Yeah.
but all the vibes are totally there.
All there. It's like all signs are pointing to that, right?
Yes.
But then
Yes.
what's both sad and
Ugh.
funny is like the mood gets killed because Lucian reports to Tamlin that the Winter Court is really not doing well, and it's specifically not doing well because two dozen of their younglings have just disappeared. They're gone. They couldn't do anything about it, and it seems to have something to do with the blight, right?
Yeah.
And also the night court too. Like there's something with the night court being involved. We don't quite know how, but there's some connection between them and the blight. So it's just like this very tragic news that Lucian just drops in the middle of like this really cute, like lovey-dovey moment, right?
Yeah, it's, like,
Um,
wildly sobering, and, like,
yes.
I kind of feel for Lucien because he's, like, probably kinda, like, stoked a little bit that, like, he's making jokes, he's probably like, "Oh, yeah, sweet, like, my homie, like, this is happening, like, this is kinda cool, he seems kinda happy, but actually, I'm so sorry, here's, like, a really fucking awful
Yeah.
thing to tell you." But yeah, it's terrifying because the way Lucian phrases it is he basically says like the blight, it took 2 dozen of their younglings, and he
Mhm.
said it just burned through their magic, then broke apart their minds. And and then he talks
What
about
does that
how it
mean?
seems that the night court is unscathed. So there's a lot of confusion here because also the blight took. So, like, I was very much with Feyre when she was kinda like, "Wait a minute, like, the blight can actually, like, hurt people?"
Right.
Because I've just oh god, I can't wait till we, like, really know the ins and outs of what the blight is because it's like, is it
Yeah.
like a magical virus? Is it
Right.
like, what is, and it's clearly, like, sweeping through. I imagine it's kind of almost like this, like, weird, like, storm cloud or some shit that's, like,
Yes.
sweeping through, and that's why we're getting creatures from other places because I feel like it's almost like when like animals, you see animals like leaving an area first because like something bad is about to happen or a storm's about to happen. Like that's kind of like
Yeah.
what I feel this is. And then also to just target the younglings.
Well, it brings up a lot of questions, right? Because like I'm trying to remember exactly what my headspace was. I think we do this a lot. Like we're trying to remember how we felt the first time reading Akatar.
Yeah.
And I think at first, yeah, I kind of thought it was like when I heard blight, I was picturing like it's affecting crops or like something like
Right.
that. But
Right.
then as once we got to this point, especially like more detail about what the blight was, I'm like, okay, this must be like a pandemic situation, but it's
Right.
only affecting some people. Like it's affecting kids, which thinking about our own pandemic that we had just had a few years ago. Yeah, there were certain groups of people who were more vulnerable, like
Yeah.
children and the elderly. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But why isn't the night court experience, why are they unscathed, right?
Yeah.
Do they have some vaccine, like do they have some kind of mat, like what is going on? So it just seems at this point in the book, the more answers we get about the blight, the more confused we
Absolutely.
get,
Yeah.
which the question is that accidental or is that intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is Feyre still not being given a direct answer about what this blight is? Is it because Tamlin and Lucien truly don't know? They're figuring it out themselves? Or is there another reason that we just don't know about yet?
It's very confusing because now to me, if the blight isn't this sort of just like non-sentient kind of concept,
Yeah.
then it's like it's scary, but it's not like, okay. But now this feels that it's like focused, that it actually
Yes.
has some kind of like it's making
Goal.
choices, which is
Yeah.
like, okay, so is there some like big bad controlling the blight? And like yeah, there's just it's very confusing, and it's also really sad because in Fairy even says it, like we know how big of a deal it is to have younglings, so
Right.
the fact that this, like, slew of children and their minds being broken apart, like, fuck,
Which
dude.
also, what does that mean exactly?
Exactly.
Like, what are they still alive and just their minds are mush? Are they dead, but their minds were turned into mush? Like, what does that mean? So,
Right, and then with what happens later in this chapter, which, like, we'll get to, but, like, a brief
mhm,
little thing, it's kind of weird to get this, like, the minds are broken apart, and then we actually meet a character who can do something to people's minds is kinda like,
mhm,
"Okay, what?" Little hard to not draw some connective
parallels.
tissue
Yes.
there. So you're just like, ah, f- more info, but further away.
Well, speaking of this character, you and I chose once again the same moment to do for our sound slash directing writing moment.
Shocking.
The quote on page 233, they're talking about the splate, right?
Hmm.
And they all get interrupted
Yep.
by Tamlin. I believe he smells something at first, right?
I mean, it's not quite clear. It just says that he's shot to his feet.
Right. He
He
senses
senses something.
something, right? He leaves for a bit, comes back, and then starts acting very like, first he tells Lucian, take Feyre over to the curtains, right?
Yeah.
Lucien does. She doesn't know why. Lucien stands in front of her. Tamlin then sits down and like acts super nonchalant.
Yeah.
He's like picking his fucking nails. The entire manor goes quiet,
Yeah.
like eerily quiet. And she says, "Not the pregnant silence of fire night, but rather a trembling quiet that made me want to scramble under the table or just start running." Lucien swore and drew his sword. I love this moment,
Mm-hmm.
probably because, and I will say it again many times, this feels like a horror moment, right?
100%.
Like it's that moment in a horror movie before like you get the jump scare or like,
Yeah.
see something really, really horrible.
Yeah.
Um, that's why I love this moment. And also especially because I mean we can say it now because we find out in this chapter like who is causing this moment,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not just anyone, it's the High Lord of the Night Court.
Yeah. So so we realize it's the guy that saved her on
Mhm.
Fire Night. We learn his name is Rhysand, which my sweet babies, little side note, I read Rhysand for the
Yeah.
longest time,
A
and
lot of
it's
people do.
still really hard for me to say
Yeah.
Rhysand. Apologies if I'm constantly bouncing back and forth. But yeah, we learn his name is Rhysand, and we learn that he is the High Lord of the Night Court.
Who at this point we've been told like Night Court is evil. Like it has been made abundantly clear you don't fuck with the Night Court.
No, scary.
Very scary. Back in the chapter when she sees the big mural of Prithian, like she talks about how scary the Night Court is depicted. There's like glowing eyes
Yep.
around it. Like
Yep.
it looks very scary. And so, yeah, like knowing that is who is causing this pregnant silence, as she put it, very scary. Like I probably would portray this in like I want you to mostly talk about because it is a very sound moment, but
Mhm.
like I would probably direct this like I would direct a horror movie, like a big horror
Totally.
movie moment of just like making it probably just to go into your territory a little bit using infrasound. Just for people to know, infrasound is a very low frequency that uh like human ears cannot hear it, but you can feel it.
Yeah.
It's used in a lot of horror movies,
Mhm.
and there's theories that it's actually possibly what can cause what people think is paranormal activity is because it
Mm.
occurs in nature. And so like there have been studies where like people think they're seeing a ghost wherever, and it turns out there's just natural infrasound in that
Yep.
area. So I'd probably use an infrasound as I do to like really exacerbate the the feeling of like the hair standing on the its ends on your arms like as he's coming in, and like really pay attention to things like his footsteps, like the little noises, and like bring that out. So yeah,
Totally.
great little moment in this
Ugh.
chapter.
Well, and it's so good too because, technically at this point, we don't know he's the High Lord of the Night Court, right? Right?
Right.
And even at this point of what Ariel and I are talking about, Feyre doesn't even really know yet that she actually has met whatever is coming. So I think what's really interesting is like how terrifying this moment is before we even really know who he is.
Yeah.
And it again, it's a lot of when we talked about when we first meet, Rhysand like earlier in the book, that there's all of this just like power around this person. And now we know why, but it's like still there's you're just feeling all this stuff. And like, yeah, that quote, the not the pregnant silence of fire night, but rather a trembling quiet. Oh, it's just it's so good. Like I get goosebumps almost every time I read it. And because I think this whole kind of like what Ariel said, I think this whole buildup of this creature, this thing, right? Because at this point we don't know coming towards. It is a lot of playing with sound for me, like 100%. Like first off,
Yeah.
you would get the pregnant, or like you would not pregnant, but you would get this sort of terrifying kind of like silence. Right, like, you would have the sort of natural manner ambience going on, and then, like, kind of right when Tamlin stops talking, I think that's when it just, like, whoop, just sorta gets sucks out of the room kinda thing,
Yeah.
and then while they're kind of scrambling around, right, because it goes quiet, and then that's while we're kind of like hearing these footsteps, hearing this person come towards the room or whatever, I'm imagining where you're watching them kind of like all get ready, right? Like Tamlin, he first has his claws out. He like tells Lucien to get her to the window. Feyre's wildly confused. And then she realizes, oh, they're glamouring me. You're like magic, a glamour to conceal me, to make me a part of Lucien, invisible,
Yeah.
hidden by the fairies' magic and scent. So you're like, okay, this is like a really big deal. And then Tamlin sits and kind of starts playing the role of like casualness of that, like everything is totally fine. In my mind, and this is also, I feel like we're kind of going into each other's territory, but I would imagine
Yeah.
that you're watching all of this, but from a sound perspective, all you're hearing, like you don't hear them rustling about. All
Yeah.
you're hearing is these footsteps coming closer
Yeah.
and closer. And like that is, and I almost imagine starting with the infrasound and then slowly bringing it up to a frequency that you
Yep.
can
Yep.
hear. So it kind of builds and it's kind of building because it says it's like, but someone was coming, someone awful enough to frighten them, someone who would want to hurt me if they knew I was here. And so just this sort of like build and build and build. Also, side note, I love that like Feyre just like takes a knife before she gets pulled to the window. Like
That's her like
it's
move every
it's so
time.
baby girl Feyre. Like she's just like,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right, I'm gonna have something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just have this slow build up and these footsteps, and like they're very specific footsteps in my mind in that they are dress shoes 100%.
Yes.
Because if we learned anything about this character during this chapter, he's a fucking classist pig with how he
Yeah.
talks to Lucien, with how he talks about things. And so it needs to be these really crisp, heeled dress shoes.
Maybe some squeaking of leather a little bit.
Exactly. Just like a little bit of
Yeah.
something. And then it would end with the sound of like someone stopping and that kind of like foot like shift, like that
Yes.
kind of happens. And then it would be reveal. And yeah, I just think the build up for this is like so good because of just like the fear before you even really know what's happening. Cause at first she's like, they're freaking out. Like, could this be the adder again? Could this be
Right.
something else? Like, what is it going to be? And I also think it's interesting that like Tamlin really calms down once Feyre is like hidden. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, his only real fear here seemingly is about Feyre. So like what is happening? Like why does it matter so much? Why is Feyre so important? Is it just cuz she's immortal? Like what is the thing? And yeah, then it would just kind of be this like slow, you know, like pan up to like Rhys's
Oh
face
yeah.
and cuz it's like no mask. He like the adder belonged to something else, someone else. And worse, I'd met him before. He saved me from those 3 fairies on Fire Night.
Yeah. That like what a phenomenal reveal.
Dude.
Like the reveals throughout this chapter are done so well from both a first reader perspective as well as a second plus reader perspective. I mean, that's even more fun, I'll say.
Yeah.
But even the first read, like I kind of remember reading this chapter and like kind of having like a clutching my pearls moment
Yeah,
when
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
"Oh shit, it's the dude, the most beautiful man she's ever seen."
Yeah.
Like he's he's here, and not only is he here, he's the High Lord of the Night Court.
Yep.
And, you brought up how Talon gets actually very casual and calm once Fair is hidden. It's because we find out he knows Rhysand pretty well. And it's not just because I mean, obviously they know each other because like they're both High Lords. They
Right.
seem to both have been High Lords for a while.
Yeah.
But on page 236, Rhys says, "Who do you think taught your beloved Tamlin the finer aspects of swords and females? You can't truly believe he learned everything in his father's little war camps." So Rhys is a like kind of mentor or was a mentor in some capacity to Tamlin, which like that's a big I always forget that.
Yeah.
Like even having read all 5 books, I always forget like they were pretty tight
Yeah.
at a certain point in time. It also establishes Rhys is
Very
older.
old.
Yeah. And it kind of makes you go like, Tamlin and Lucien have really painted the Night Court as this
Mhm.
bad place and the High Lord as this bad person. So what happened? Something
Yeah.
must have happened if Rhysand was teaching Tamlin all this stuff. Presumably, and who knows, but presumably Tamlin probably appreciated it at one point. So something happened.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a little bit of the question of, like, how much can we trust of what Rhysand is saying?
Great point.
Like, can we really it feels like a very classic, like, slimy villain move of just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like, we were the best of friends," but really they, like, have been enemies forever. But
Yeah.
I think the thing that makes us kind of immediately believe him is because even earlier than that, when Tamlin calls him Rhysand, he, like, responds.
Yeah.
He's like, "Rhysand, come on." He's like, "Come now, Tamlin. I don't see you for 49 years and you start calling me Rhysand? Only
Yeah.
my prisoners and my enemies call me that." So you're like, "Okay." So and then later we do see the shortened. We see the
Yes.
RHYS, which is Rhys.
Yeah.
And you do see Tamlin be like, "Okay, come on, Rhys, like drop it." Kind of,
Yeah.
right? And like how quickly he is to jump into that nickname, you're like, "Okay, you like those to me are the markers that Rhysand is telling the truth because you're like,
Yes.
you don't slip into that and you don't have a nickname for someone that you have always been enemies with,
Especially a High Lord.
especially a high lord." And so it's like, so clearly there was some somewhat positiveness between these two characters at a
Yeah.
at a point in time that clearly something happened. And what my brain kind of goes to too is like, how much older than Tamlin is he?
Yep.
Are they around a similar age? Because if
Yeah.
so, that could mean that they were both non-high lords at the same time.
Yep.
And it's kind of like our only we don't really get a lot of Tamlin's past. We only really get stuff when like Tamlin tells us and like Lucien doesn't really give us like anything.
No.
And so this is like the only other kind of info dump we've sort of gotten. And
Yeah.
it's just you're like, okay, like immediately you're like there's a connection between these two. But it also seems like they have been enemies though for a while
Yeah.
because like when they talk about so we learned that the head in the garden was a present
Yes.
from Rhysand, and he even says he was like, "But a nice reminder of the fun days, wasn't it?"
Yeah.
And you're
Which,
like,
like,
"Okay, so lots of questions." But I took that as like, Rhys, this character has been giving you some shit for like a while and has
yeah.
been playing really gnarly tricks on you
Yeah.
for a while. But this number of 49 and
I was gonna
50
say 49 is a very specific it's
number.
a yeah, why wouldn't you just round up to 50, right?
Yeah.
I think most people would. And like, it's so funny cuz like, upon seeing that for the first time you're like, "Damn, that's a long time." But also for the Fae who live God knows how long, like that's like, I don't know, maybe a year to
Yeah.
them for what it is to humans. So it's probably not that, but I think that that's what makes it that much more specific is if 49 years is nothing to them, why be so specific with that number versus just saying 50-ish years?
Yeah, like what happened? And then also what's hard what I remember too is that Alice says something about how she had to flee about 50 years ago or
Yes.
49 years ago or something. And then we also from the Surreal got this thing
Yeah.
the deceit what and so you're like, okay, something real big happened in Prithian
Yep.
49 years ago.
And is it connected to the blight? Is it
Right.
connected to this? Is that when the blight started? Like,
Yes.
we don't know, but it is very, very specific.
Yeah.
The other thing that gets brought up this chapter is we get a new, aside from Rhysand's name, we get a second new name. And that name is Amarantha.
Mhm.
Because as they're talking about, Reese is saying, like, did you get my little present? Blah, blah, blah. We get Lucien, who finally steps in and says, "You're just Amarantha's whore." And Rhys replies, "Her whore I might be, but not without my reasons." So I think it is safe to say Amarantha is the she that
Yeah.
has been referred to many times at this point. This mysterious woman who keeps being referred to as either she or her. We finally get a name, and her name is Amarantha. And this Rhysand, who is a high lord, the high lord of the scariest,
Yeah.
most powerful court, is being referred to her as her whore.
Her whore. Yeah.
That is significant.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
makes you go, if Rhysand is some big scary person, who the fuck is Amarantha
Yeah.
then?
Who is she? It's very scary to think how powerful this Amarantha could be. Because if we do truly believe, right, that this is the she,
Yeah.
then she's been doing some pretty gnarly, awful shit.
Yeah.
And if Rhysand, because kind of towards the end of the chapter, you also can kind of tell that he's actually there because she clearly sent him to
Yes.
like have a conversation with Tamlin.
Yep.
And so you're just like, okay, so he's kind of like her like lackey.
Yeah.
And yeah, with how we have felt about Rhysand, and like there's so much language throughout this chapter that talks about the power that is just like emanating, just like coming off of him. Yeah, who the fuck is this lady? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's very scary. And if she isn't attached to the blight, then there's a lot of shit going on in
Oh,
Prithian that is terrifying, because it's like you almost hope that she's attached to the blight so that way there's not these like multiple awful things that are going on. Like it will be a lot easier if it's like one evil, you know what I mean?
you know what it reminds me of? It totally reminds me of our pandemic, right? When like we were dealing with like a pandemic that no one had any control over, and then like all this political stuff that was going
Mm,
on simultaneously, pretty separate from it. Like, so it's possible. It is totally possible that they're separate. But I think one thing we do need to remember is this is a book, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
like every, what the author writes is intentional. So I think we can theorize that they're connected in
Yeah.
some way,
It,
right?
it's the only thing that makes sense to me,
Yes.
honestly.
And the other thing I think it makes sense of, now that we know that I almost said Lucian, that Rhysand is Amarantha's whore, which is we'll get back to the specifics of the word whore because I
Yeah.
do want to talk about that. Maybe that's why the Night Court is immune
Right.
to the
No,
blight.
absolutely. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I don't think those two things are separate. There has to be some kind of connection between those two things.
Well, yeah, because he says like, like the quote you literally just said, like Amarantha's whore I might be, but like he basically says like I have my own reasons like for doing
Yeah,
that. And then we literally just came off of this story of the Night Court being like clearly kind of almost like immune to some of the things that are going on. Like again, it's very hard to not make like that kind of parallel of just like, okay,
absolutely.
obviously he he's clearly putting himself in a position to like protect, or at least just, or we can just assume that whatever this Amarantha wants, the Night
Yeah.
Court are mentally aligned with that.
The other thing I want to say is like the word whore
Yeah.
is a it's funny because like I feel like as feminists, like it feels weird saying that word,
I know
like
it's a little triggering. I'm like, ugh.
yeah, right. But like when I think that's intentional, right? Because like not only is it an overall triggering word,
Hmm.
but men do not often call other men whores,
No.
especially in like we don't quite know what era this. I mean, obviously this is a fictional world, but it's a very like ye olden times kind of like world. Today, maybe you'll get that a little bit more, but back then, especially like you don't get that word, at least in relation to men, a
Yeah.
lot. So to me, this word absolutely has a sexual connotation to it,
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, Lucian would probably just call Rhys her lackey or something along, like you said, like along those lines,
Yeah.
right? But whore is a very specific word, and I want people to remember that because this will this will not be the first time that Rhys is called that. Well, and what's interesting, kind of brings me to another quote is, at this point, both during the Calanmai scene where we meet Rhysand and then this scene, even though both scenes convey him to different degrees as scary, right? Because, even when he saves Feyre from
Yeah.
the three other fairies, she still describes him as being like kind of scary in this like very powerful way.
Yeah.
And then obviously in this chapter we get that she still has very interesting ways of describing him. So on page 236, she says, Rhysand laughed, a lover's laugh, low and soft and intimate. Is that any way to speak to a High Lord or Prithian? And then this is where we find out that he's a High Lord, right? So, she then goes on to describe, and from the way darkness seemed to ripple from him, from those violet eyes that burned like stars, which now we kind of understand what the star imagery is because
Yeah.
he's the Night Court Lord
Mhm.
or High Lord. But she keeps describing this bad guy as basically sexy, right?
Yes. Yes. She is clearly going through all these, like, very, like, awkward and kind of confusing feelings
Yeah.
because she still says, she's like, "Rhysand smiled, heartbreaking in its beauty."
Yeah.
And then there's that other moment where she's like, it's really good. She's like, "Rhysand approached Tamlin, each movement smooth as silk. His voice dropped into a whisper, an erotic caress of sound that brought heat to my cheeks."
I
So
mean,
so yeah, it's like it's wildly confusing because he's kind of playing this, like, he's playing the role of this, like, lover,
yeah.
but like to Tamlin. Like, it's really
Yeah.
bizarre. It kind of just sounds like this guy just sort of, like, floats with, like, sexuality and, like, kind of, like, everything that he does. And so, yeah, it's very confusing because while this is a pretty, like, scary scene, it's also, like, weirdly hot, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm so confused." And to me, it really feels like I wrote it multiple times in my notes of just like, "Okay, got it. Bad boy. Got it. He's the bad
Yes.
boy." Like, it feels very much like that dark bad boy in the, like, romance, movies where they literally just, like, ooze sex, and
Yeah.
they use it as, like, their power, as, like, they're
Yeah.
because they want to make everyone uncomfortable, right? They want
Yeah.
to kind of just really, like, poke at people, which from, like, a purely villain standpoint, I actually think is, like, really scary and icky
Oh,
because it's a
yeah.
very intimate way. It's like it's instead of him just sort of being this, like, powerful brute,
Yeah.
he's being kind of like she even says, like, with steps that were too graceful, too feline. Like,
Mm.
he's there's kind of like I'm trying to find a way to not say it, but there's almost this, like, slight feminine quality of this
Yeah.
sort of, like, I'm just imagining this really beautiful man kind of, like, slinking about. And that is actually more terrifying because there's a level of, like, utter confidence and security in your power that
Yeah.
you have to have
Yes.
to, like, move about that way. And I think that's why Lucien and Tamlin keep trying to throw the word whore at him, because I think they're
Mhm.
really trying to get under his skin. And and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he moves about in a very, like, sexual way. And so they're kind of trying to, like, weaponize his weapon, like, back at him. Kind of like, okay, yeah, you're gonna be this little, like, little slinky seductor, like, yeah,
I was gonna
whore,
say
like,
he is a
slut, like,
seducer.
yeah, exactly.
He's a seducer. There's a couple things I wanna say about that, that I find really, really interesting is, I think at this point it's safe to say, like, you have to wonder if there's some sexual politics going on
Mm,
because on page 236 Lucian says, and you have no power here, so clear out. Amarantha's bed is growing cold,
yeah.
right? So that paired with when when Lucian first calls Rhys Amarantha's whore, and Rhysand says her whore I might be, but not without my reasons.
Right.
You kind of have to wonder, is he Amarantha's quote unquote whore? And we're using that word because it's what's being used
Yeah.
right now. Because he genuinely is in love with and believes in Amarantha, or is he doing some political maneuvers here?
Right.
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 So I think that's a big question that kind of hangs in the air. But the other thing is, and something that really struck me, I think, reading it this time, is how much of kind of the opposite Rhysand is to Tamlin, right? In
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of facets. So you have Tamlin, right, who is the High Lord of the Spring Court. When we think of spring, we think of like daytime, right? We
Yeah.
think of like bright sun, beautiful meadows, whatnot. If we're talking about Tamlin's looks, he is like, I kind of feel like he's built almost like a football player, like very bulky,
I just
like
imagine Thor.
Thor is perfect. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what I imagine. Long blonde hair and these like vibrant green eyes, right? And he also has this golden mask on his
Yeah.
face. So we can't even see half his face, right? Then you have Rhysand, who is from the Night Court, right? When I think of night, I mean, obviously night is throughout all seasons, but when I think of night, I think of like the cold, right?
Yeah.
Like the temperature drops. He has short, dark hair,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these vibrant violet eyes, which
Yeah.
is not a naturally occurring eye color,
No.
right? I mean, I guess for Faye, I'm sure it is, but
Yeah.
like to humans, it's not a natural color. I think she even says like they're so dark blue, technically,
Yeah.
like they look violet. And he has this swagger about him. Like I always picture him in like a well-tailored like suit
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that. He's described as feline, like you brought up, whereas Tamlin is described as beast-like. And when I
Yeah.
think of beasts, I think of like, like wolves, something that is a little more canine like. Also, the other thing is, with the exception of Calanmai, right? Tamlin's pretty chaste,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
there are multiple times at this point where he could have tried to bed Feyre,
Yeah.
and he actually doesn't. Instead, the last chapter, we see this like gorgeous romantic scene where they do stay up all night. They actually nap together,
Yeah.
but he doesn't try anything more than kissing her on the lips, and it's very, she literally has to ask for more,
Yeah.
right? Whereas I kind of get the feeling
Yeah.
Rhysand is not quite the same.
Yes.
If he had Feyre alone, I don't know if it would play out the same way,
Right.
right? So I feel like we're getting these two opposing forces, which is interesting because, like we brought up earlier, Rhysand apparently taught Tamlin about women.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, I definitely think that uh Rhys uses Tamlin's chasteness like against him
Absolutely.
because, when he goes into her mind, Jesus fucking Christ, when he
Oh,
taps into her mind, because that's not terrifying at all.
nah.
He basically, like, the things that he says. She has the most delicious thoughts about you. She wondered about the feeling of your fingers on her thighs between them too. Like, why did she wonder if it would feel good to have you bite her breast the way you bit her neck? Like, he is very aware
Yeah.
that Tamlin is a lot more chaste than he is, because
Yeah.
he's bringing up all these thoughts that are terrifying for Feyre to hear out loud.
Yeah.
But it's also like he's actively trying to make Tamlin like uncomfortable. And
Oh,
I mean, yeah, I think that quote is like a perfect example of what you're saying. It's like these are just such polar opposite characters.
yes. Well, and one thing, as I was going through our quotes, we actually got a bit of an answer to his age, at least in regards to Tamlin.
Yeah.
And I feel like this. I mean, I think it at least explains how he was able to like mentor Tamlin and like the age, how much of an age difference there is.
Right.
So on page 236, Rhysand says, "I was slaughtering on the battlefield before you were even born."
Yeah.
So Rhysand was at least of an age, I'd say at least what the Fae would consider like their late teens, early 20s minimum before Tamlin was born. So that's I think that is a little telling in terms of, like, you have this figure that Tamlin at some point seemed to maybe look up to.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not necessarily look up to in, like, in a chosen like, he chose to, but, like, in a,
Right.
like, least teacher sort of way. Um, and, Rhys has definitely I know it gets mentioned very briefly, but there was, actually not briefly at all, it's talked about a lot. There was the battle 500 years ago
Yeah.
involving the fairies and the humans, and so, I don't think it's ever clarified, but I'm assuming that's what battlefield that Rhys is referring to in this. Because Tamlin does say he wasn't old enough to fight in that war. So, yeah, we get some kind of age difference, and you have to kind of wonder if that's why, at least part of the reason why Rhys has this swagger and confidence
Yeah.
to him. He is older than
Yeah.
Tamlin, even though Tamlin's been around for a long time. Yeah, there's just this very, like, interesting dichotomy between the two of, like, the chase Prince Charming
Right.
version of Tamlin, right? Versus this, like, I feel if this were like a Disney movie, right? Like, Rhys would be like Gaston, or like kind of like one of those types of, like, there's like this sexuality oozing from him, and like it portrays him in this, like, villain light,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting too though, because I feel like we get a little tell from Reese though a little bit.
Mm,
In that we're kind of able to see that this kind of whole horror comment though actually clearly bothers him a little bit,
yes. Yes.
because after that quote of saying, like, you have no power here, clear out, Amarantha's bed is growing cold, it literally says, Rhysand snickered, but then he was upon Lucien, too fast for me to follow with my
Mm.
human eyes, growling in his face. Lucien pressed me into the wall with his back hard enough that I stifled a cry as I was squished against the wood. And then that's when he says, I was slaughtering on the battlefield before you were even born, Rhysand snarled. Then as quickly as he had come, he withdrew, casual and careless.
Mm.
No, I would never dare to paint that dark immortal grace, not in 100 years. Besides, he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets, who do you think, blah, blah. There is an element of this, like, he's using the sexuality as a weapon,
Yeah.
but there's also an element of it that it clearly, like, bothers him a little bit too, because there's also a moment later where it's like, you're just Amarantha's whore. Her whore I might be, but not without my reasons, which I know we've said this quote multiple times, but what I think is interesting is right afterwards it says, I, being Feyre, I flinched as his voice whetted itself into an edge. At
Mm.
least I haven't bided my time among the hedges and flowers while the world has gone to hell.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Right. So clearly this horror comment kind of bothers him a little bit.
Yeah.
But then he starts giving away a lot of this information that really makes it sound like there is something that is happening to Tamlin,
Mhm.
or that is going to happen soon.
Involves him in some way.
Involves him in some way. It sounds like it's something that he maybe could have been fixing it or working on it. And he even says, like, almost half a century holdup in a country estate. I don't know how you
Mhm.
managed it, but you're such a stubborn bastard that this must have seemed like paradise compared to under the mountain.
Which what
What
is
the fuck
that?
is under the mountain? And it said, I
Which
suppose,
mountain?
yeah. And he's like, I suppose it is. I'm surprised though. 49 years and no attempts to save yourself or your lands, even now that things are getting interesting again.
This chapter is just chock full of, like, the more answers we get, the more even more questions we get, right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, we get the name of her, right?
right.
But with that comes, like, 10 new questions, you
Yeah,
know?
because you're like, okay, and like clearly a lot of this is involved with this Amarantha, because you're just
Yes.
like, okay, what does she want with Tamlin? Why is it good that he's broken? Because Rhys says that to him at the end, and it's like, and what,
Yeah.
and he even says, like, I'm sure you'll be more likely to take her offer, and you're like, what the fuck
What
offer?
offer? Is this fucking Don Corleone? Like,
Yeah,
what are
like
we talking
like
about?
what are we doing? And then it's wildly confusing because all I can really kind of come to is that clearly something started 49 years ago.
Yeah.
And whether it's the blight or whatever, clearly something started that has to do with Tamlin, has to do with some offer.
Yes.
And it sounds like the time might be coming up because we also kind of heard some of this stuff before with Lucien and Tamlin, where Lucien was like, time is running out.
The borders are collapsing.
Yeah.
More creatures are coming in.
Exactly. And then at the end of this chapter, we basically get Rhys saying, like, I look forward to seeing you three under the mountain.
Yeah.
And even before that, Tamlin is literally like, Rhys, I'll see you soon. And so you're like, okay, so something's been going on that potentially Tamlin could have fixed and he hasn't been able to. Clearly, from Rhys's perspective, he feels like he's been resting on his laurels and not doing fucking shit. That's clearly how Rhys feels about it. But then also, like, we have this weird moment when he goes into Feyre's mind.
Well, before that, he finds Feyre.
Right.
So, because remember, Feyre is glamoured for half of this chapter pretty much by Lucien, right?
Yeah.
And when Rhys finds out that she's there, not just there, but has been glamoured, he gets pissed.
Furious.
I mean, he says, how dare you glamour me? Or you dare glamour me. I'm sorry. So he goes over and he actually recognizes her.
Yeah.
And is shockingly, I'm not going to say nice to her, but he's not like, I don't think he has the reaction most people would expect.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Especially to a human.
Yeah.
He actually seems almost like a little entertained.
Yes.
That she's there.
Yes.
Right? And he asks Tamlin, who pray tell is your guest? And Lucien comes in and says, my betrothed.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, what a wingman to come in and
what
help
a homie.
You. Like,
what
he gets some extra points for that.
And then fucking Rhys.
He just starts running his mouth.
Dude.
Saying, you know, oh, here I was thinking you still mourned your common lover for all these centuries. He also then says, I knew you like to stoop low with your lovers, Lucien, but I never thought you'd actually dabble with mortal trash. The lady of the Autumn Court will be grieved indeed when she hears of her youngest son. If I were you, I'd keep your new pet well away from your father. So to me, this also says Rhysand knows Lucien's parent, which makes sense because, like, you know, Lucien's dad is a High Lord.
Yeah.
So they're going to mingle, but he's in contact with them.
Yes.
He's like basically low-key threatening to tell them, right?
Yeah. And he also like threatens his mom, basically.
Yeah.
He was because Lucien like freaks out after this line. And then Rhys is like, you draw blood for me, Lucien, and you'll learn how quickly Amarantha's whore can make the entire Autumn Court bleed, especially its darling lady.
You know what this reminds me of? And I know I made like a Don Corleone joke earlier, but like this feels very like mafioso.
Oh yeah.
Like lingo. We're talking like we're making threats. We're like both like overt threats, but like very underlying threats, which I feel is like such a mafia thing to do.
Yes.
Like you're not going to actually say the thing, but like the person knows.
Yes.
And also like we don't know Rhys's powers yet, but we actually do get a hint.
Yeah, but so like quickly before like we get into that portion, I just feel like this whole the back and forth between Lucien and Tamlin, or sorry, between Lucien and Rhysand is like really interesting to me because he also has this like after he has his kind of whole moment of talking about how Tamlin calls him Rhysand, he like turns, you know, towards Lucien. And he says, like, oh, a fox mask appropriate for you, you know, and Lucien's like, go to hell. And he says, always a pleasure dealing with the rabble.
Yeah.
He's like bringing up these wildly triggering things for Lucien. And then to keep bringing his mom into the situation, which we've kind of learned is like kind of Lucien's only real regret about leaving is like his mom.
Yes.
And you're like, this fucking guy, like, wowie, like, there is no love loss between any of these two. And it's ugh.
To threaten someone's mother, like,
Yes.
that's, like, one of the worst things
Yeah.
a person can do in terms of, like, a threat, right? But
Yeah.
here's what fascinates me even more. So he, like, threatens Lucien, threatens his mom, but then when it comes to Feyre,
Yeah.
right? He sees her, he acknowledges, "Oh, I know you, blah, blah, blah." After all this whole Lucien drama, he says to Feyre, if you were wise, you would be screaming and running from this place, from these people. It's a wonder that you're still here, actually." Then Feyre says, "My confusion must have been written across my face," for Rhysand laughed loudly. "Oh, she doesn't know, does she?" What does that
What
mean?
does that mean? What does
What
that
what
mean?
what doesn't Farrah know? And I think this is like one of the magical parts of this book. So I know we've mentioned it on the spoiler episode. I don't know if we've mentioned it in any of the spoiler free episodes, but Akatar is the only Sarah J. Maas series that is written in first person.
Yeah.
Not all the books actually. We'll get to those later, but the first 3 to 4 books are. All of her other series, Crescent City and Throne of Glass, they're all third person narrative. We won't get into our theories of why we think that is, but what it does bring up is this very interesting technique that Mama Mass can use in her writing, which is not like Farrah doesn't have all the information.
Yeah.
She can withhold information from not just her main character, but from the audience, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, this is where I get a little nerdy and as a writer, like I love that shit. Like I think that's so fun. And I think it's one of the most compelling things of this series is we are learning alongside Feyre what this world is, what it entails, and then these mysteries within it, right?
Yeah.
So it's what makes it so good. But yeah, like there's something that she doesn't know. And what's even worse is Rhys then exhibits some of his powers, which is mind reading,
Really.
and goes into her mind to see what she does know.
Well, and it's obvious that it's like a little bit more than mind reading
Yeah.
because he literally says, "I'd forgotten that human minds are as easy to shatter as eggshells."
Mm-hmm.
And he says like, "Look how delightful she is. Look how she's trying not to cry out in terror. It would be quick, I promise." Which like I take as like him kind of being like, "If I were to destroy you, like it would be quick. Like don't worry."
Right.
And so it's like he has that, and I forget what the like name tends to be in other series. It's
Yeah.
like it's like a it's a D word. It's like Demonti or something like
Yeah.
that. But it's like he has power over the mind.
Yes.
And it's so cuz she's like, "Against my volition, my body straightened, every muscle going taut, my bones straining, magic but deeper than that. Power that seized everything inside me and took control. Even my blood flowed where he willed it. I couldn't move. An invisible talon tipped hand scraped against my mind. And I knew one push, one swipe of those mental claws, and who I was would cease to exist."
That is so
It's
intense.
so scary. It's so
Yeah.
scary because
Yeah.
we've gotten scary things from like an externally physical situation. But
Yeah.
when something can actually come into your mind and completely control you, like that is terrifying. And I actually think it really explains why Rhys is this pretty cocky asshole, because it
Yeah.
really does not matter how powerful you are physically against him. It doesn't
Right.
fucking matter because he
No.
can enter your mind. Like it is, this is like really scary. And in all honesty, the fact that all he does is just expose her like horny thoughts for Tamlin is
Right.
kind of crazy that that's all he does. Like he
Yeah.
very easily could have done he could have done anything to her.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and I think that goes along with what you were just saying of like it's very bizarre, this kind of, we're seeing two qualities of like they're still pretty fucked up, but it's like
Yeah.
we're seeing one element of like it's hard to not feel like he has a soft spot for her a little
Yes.
bit. You know, I'm not trying to argue that he's like a good guy right now, but
No,
it's
no,
just
no.
like because it's extremely violating all the stuff that he says and shares. And then also he ends up saying, if it's any consolation, she would have been the one for you. You might
Would
have
have
gotten
been.
And you might have gotten away with it a bit late, though. She's more stubborn than you are. What?
What does it mean?
What does all of this mean? Gotten away with
Yes.
what? And what do you mean she would have? Like, what is
Right.
about to happen that makes it sound like Tamlin and Feyre aren't going to get their happy story? What the fuck is under
Right.
the mountain? And like, what do you mean it's too late? Like, what?
One thing I really want to mention, just going back to his mind reading powers, and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler for like people who haven't read the series, because it's like once it gets brought up, it's immediately explained. But for those familiar with Fourth Wing, right? In Fourth Wing, people who can read minds are called intrinsics, and they're forbidden. They're
Yeah.
killed
Yeah.
because it's too dangerous of a power to
Yes.
for one person to have.
Yes.
So, and I know that's a totally separate series that has no bearing on this one, but it's to give you an idea of anyone, because like mind reading is a pretty common power
Yeah.
in the romantasy genre, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I think you kind of get a similar thing every time of just like, it is one of the, if not the greatest powers a person can have,
Yeah.
right? Because it's so in the wrong hands, it is like the most dangerous
Yeah.
power, right? So I think that's significant. And yeah, like him going into her mind and saying what you just brought up of like, she would have been the one for you. You might have gone away with it a bit late. Like it's and what I find fascinating is he's reading her mind, so her perspective of her not knowing what the fuck he's even talking about,
Yeah.
and still gathering whatever he is referencing. She would have been the one. Like, it just, again, for as many answers as we get in this chapter, we get far more questions.
Yes.
This guy.
Dude, this guy. And like, I think there's also like a really weird thing I think that kind of like happens to our viewpoint of Tamlin in this chapter too. Because when Rhys is walking towards, like once Rhys discovers that Feyre's there and Rhys is like walking towards her, you know, I'm imagining him kind of like creepily slinking towards her.
Yeah.
And Tamlin tells him like to leave. And she literally says like, and yet he didn't make a move to attack, despite the claws, despite Rhysand still approaching me. Perhaps a battle between two high lords could tear this manor to its foundation. Or perhaps if Rhysand was indeed this woman's lover, the retaliation from hurting him would be too great, especially with the added burden of facing the blight. And to me, this little moment kind of gives me this thing of like, what? No, fuck that. Like, no, Tamlin, like, fucking, like, fight for the gal. Like, this is terrifying. Because it's also what makes this whole mind moment even more terrifying is that Sarah has taken away this possible protector or this possible savior for Feyre in the situation. She has put us in a place where we now are like, oh, he may not do anything because of just the what could be worse if like what could happen if Tamlin did attack.
Yes.
And so now all of a sudden it feels very lonely. And it feels all of a sudden it becomes like, because you're already scared, right, in this chapter.
Right.
But I think once she like pulls Tamlin away from us, it's kind of like, oh, fuck. And it's sad too, like Tamlin, you know, she's like, but there was nothing between us now, her and Rhys, and the air was sharp and cold, but Tamlin remained where he was, and Lucien didn't so much as blink, as Rhysand, with horrific gentleness, pried the knife from my hands and sent it scattering across the room. Okay, weapons gone. Like, this is a fucking terrifying, and then he fucking violates her mind and like lets her know he's there with these little talon brushing against everything. Like, she's put in this really awful space. And then we get this bowing moment.
This was really hard. And, you know, I think this whole scene, because, I think I had also the instinct of like, Tamlin, why aren't you doing anything? But I realized like what the scene is Rhys has a proverbial gun to Feyre's head.
Yes.
And it's that thing, because it's not, like, because we established it's not just the mind reading. He can like shred minds.
He could shatter her. Yeah.
Yes. And it's that thing of, like, we've seen this in many movies and TV shows and books where it's like, no matter how strong the other person is, if there's a gun, real or otherwise, to someone's head, it doesn't matter how strong you are because that person can just pull the trigger before you can even reach them,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, he does. He's put in this very submissive
Yeah.
position of having to literally bow and basically kiss Rhys's feet so that he doesn't harm Feyre. So, like, I actually get why Tamlin doesn't do
Oh,
anything.
yeah, no, I get it. I absolutely
Yeah.
do. But that little like romance girly inside of me,
Oh,
right? That is aware I'm reading a book is
yeah.
like, nah, bitch, fucking shred him up. You know what I
I
mean? Like
know. I
that's like,
know.
but I completely understand why it happens. Also, this moment of bowing, it really exposes that Farah is actually wildly important
Mhm.
because the main reason why he bows is so Rhys doesn't tell Amarantha about her.
Well, and the big question is Feyre important because she's important to Tamlin?
Right. Like that's what I'm assuming is that it's like
Yeah.
because Rhys says like Amarantha will enjoy breaking her almost as much as
Yeah.
she'll enjoy watching you as she shatters her bit
Right.
by bit. So like I'm taking this as like Rhys can really read that Tamlin is in love with this woman.
Yes. He sees right
And
through Lucian's lie.
yeah. And he can tell obviously Tamlin is the source of like focus from this Amarantha person.
Yes.
And so it seems like she killing her and breaking her would be more about hurting
Getting to
Tamlin,
Tamlin. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's this really awful moment because on one end you're kind of like, "Oh, look how important she is to him."
Right.
Like, "Oh my goodness." And then on the other you're like, "Fuck. We finally
Yeah.
get our oh, they're in love." And we find it
Yes.
out because she's being threatened. Like that's how
Yeah.
we really find out how much Tamlin is in love with her. Like
Which is
to
so
like
fucked.
it's so fucked up. And you can tell that Feyre is like kind of going through some shit because she says like I could have wept with rage at the sight of Tamlin being forced to bow to someone, at the sight of my high lord being put so low.
Yeah.
She's like, I wish for the knife Rhysand had chucked away for anything with which to kill him. It's like,
Yeah.
it's so brutal. And then Rhys to be like, are you doing this for your sake or for hers?
Yeah.
You're far too desperate, Tamlin. It's off-putting. Becoming High Lord made you so boring.
One thing I do think though is obviously we know he's fucking with Farah to get to Tamlin, right? But I think the big question is she merely collateral damage
Right.
or is there something
Is
else?
there something else? Because even like the quote we already said before of like, you could have gotten away with it if if you had done it in time or like whatever. And you're like, gotten away with what? Why?
Yeah,
Like
like
what are we talking about? Is that why it seems like Rhys may have like a soft spot for her? Like, is she important? Like, are we going to do like the fantasy thing where like, she's some like crazy descendant of this like
right.
other magical being that we didn't know about, and all of a sudden she's like, I'm the chosen one,
Right.
like is it going to be one of those things? Like, I don't know, there are so many questions here. And I also think it's interesting how many times Rhys kind of brings up this thing of like, because he says it a few times before of like, yeah, you becoming High Lord, like you got really uncool after you
Boring.
became High Lord. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, what? Like,
Well,
what is your guys' relationship? Ugh.
I love though, like despite all of this, right? Like this is like
Oh
I
yeah.
think the most in danger Feyre has been yet, right?
I mean, the
Like
Naga are pretty. This is a different level of danger, though. This is like,
I think when I say danger, I mean like she's never been with someone this
no,
powerful
no, I
where
don't. Yeah,
like she's in a dangerous
yeah.
position, right? But our favorite
Our girl,
illiterate 19-year-old
dude.
is so fucking
She's
smart
so smart.
because when he asks for her name, she
Fucking
says, keeping my mind blank and calm. So she knows to like make sure because he can read minds not to think of her name. I blurted out the first name that came to mind, a village friend of my sister's whom I'd never spoken to and whose face I couldn't recall. Claire Better. which we've gotten one mention of a Claire better, like I think in like one of the first 3
Yeah.
chapters.
Yeah.
Like Nesta, I think mentioned something about one of the girls in town being named Claire better. So we
Yeah.
kind of know who she is.
Yeah.
And he just takes it, right? Like she, because of how smart she was, he doesn't think anything else. He doesn't think, oh, she's giving a fake name, right? And then on the same page, it says, he says, bye. It says, then Rhysand vanished into nothing, as if he'd stepped through a rip in the world, leaving us alone in horrible, trembling silence. So that same silence that
Yep.
introduced him, they're left with, which
Yep.
is just so eerie.
It's so eerie, but like I'm so glad you brought up that quote because I was just like, our fucking girl, dude. Oh
Yep.
my God. She already has the wherewithal to be like, if I give him my name, he could potentially find my family and like
Yeah.
fuck them up. Like, I do not think that I would have that much like forethought.
No.
You know, I mean, yes, I do think it would have naturally been like, it does not feel safe to give this guy my name. You know,
But to keep your mind blank.
that exactly. It's the keeping of the
Yes.
mind blank. You're like, bitch, look at you slipping into these Prithian magical shit.
My intrusive thoughts immediately would have been like Ariel, Ariel, Ariel.
Yeah, I know. Like, I know. Immediately would have been like, don't think Corryn, don't think Corryn, don't think Corryn. You know, but yeah, like for her to, but he could steal my name from my mind if I hesitated for too long.
Yeah.
Like, wow, what a queen.
One small note I just want to say is like, if you've been in the fandom long enough, you know it's a very common joke to be like, haha, Feyre's illiterate, right? But it's like, and I think it brings up a very, I think, pertinent for the world kind of point of like, just because you might not have like intellectual smarts for whatever, in this case, Feyre literally wasn't sent to school, right? That's
Yeah.
not her fucking fault. Doesn't mean you're not smart. Like, Feyre has a lot of fucking street smarts because of
Yeah.
how she's had to survive. And this is
Exactly.
just a wonderful example of one of
Totally.
those. She knows he's going to read my mind. So don't think of your name. Think of this other person's name.
Yep.
Right. So
Yep.
we love her for that.
Ugh, what a killer gal. And like such an incredible, because like really most like this chapter is just Feyre like watching something, right? Like she doesn't, it's literally her just watching.
Kind of helpless.
Can only imagine how wildly confused she is after like
plus everything else.
This whole conversation. And I think what's really interesting too is like when we do get into Feyre's mind during this, there's a little like, yeah, there's a few of her being like, okay, wait, like, could this be where Amarantha is? Or like, could this be like, she has some of these little moments, but so much of her mind is just like a reaction to how Rhys is navigating through the room. Like, she mentions multiple times that like attempting to paint, like, no, she's never going to attempt to paint this because this is like terrifying. Or how even she's like seeing Tamlin, like she's seeing a rage on Tamlin that she's like never really seen before, like she's like, Tamlin's face was twisted with such feral rage that it struck a different, deeper chord of terror in me. It's 239, like I think right when Rhys is like walking towards her, and it's just, it's like all these observational things. Like she's not asking a ton of questions, and I just think that's kind of interesting too. Yeah, that's where her brain is. But then baby girl is just like
so on it. I mean, it's those survival instincts. Yeah. Right? Like she's really honed those survival instincts.
Yeah.
Which we'll just say it's going to do her a lot of favors.
Seriously.
Going forward. Speaking of going forward, so last chapter to this chapter I feel was an emotional whiplash. We're going to have another one for this next chapter. Next week's chapter, we're only going to do one. We're doing 27. Mm-hmm. All I'll say is it's not scary like this one. I can tell you that. Yeah. That one, I feel like we're going to have just as much to talk about, but in a very different way.
Very different way. Yeah.
Thank God. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. We'd love it if you subscribed, rated, and reviewed. It really helps us get out there, helps us find more ACOTAR fans like yourselves. You can also follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Cauldron Save Us Pod, where we do some silly, silly content. We've been actually we mentioned this in the last episode. We've been finding people have actually been sending us some really fun theories. So,
Yeah.
and if you want to send us some more theories or just pop in, say hi with a suggestion or just to say hi,
Yeah.
you can email us at cauldronsaveus@gmail.com. You know, one thing I am happy about with this chapter is without spoiling anything, we finally got like solidly to one of what I find the most interesting characters of the series.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just sometimes when Arrow and I are recording, like I almost wish we weren't so worried about like how long our episodes were going to be,
I
because
know.
I'm looking at my notes being like, oh, there's like an hour and a half more worth of things that like I could so easily say. But I just think this chapter is just so, the language and the way she chooses to have us navigate through this chapter is just fucking fascinating. So,
So fascinating. But hey, on the note of wanting to talk more about it for an hour, those of you who have actually read the entire series, you can find the spoiler chapter or the spoiler episode right now
yep.
on your feed. We are going to talk about it for another hour or so,
Yes, we are.
and we can actually not be as cryptic in that one as we are with this. So, yeah, come join us.
Yeah, but you know, for now, our sweet baby first time readers, we love you. We hope you're doing okay. And you know, as always, you're welcome.
And we're really sorry for
We're
this
really
episode,
sorry.
for all the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.